Well, first off, Mr. Jackson, or Jason, thank you so much for coming back to speak with all of us. What does Bowling Green kind of mean to you? And when you look back at your time at this university, what are kind of some of the memories that kind of flood to your mind?
Now that my sons, I have one that has finished college and one who's going to finish whenever he decides. And the thing I said to them prior to going to university was, I hope that you have half the experience that we had. I think about something about Bowling Green. I don't want to exaggerate it, but it feels like every day. Like there's just something that's around me, or a photo, or a memory. My work, I mean, everything that I've become as a sports broadcaster all began here. And so my experience was more than that, and I love that as well. But these remain, and I've had some experiences over the last 30 years since leaving here. These remain still the 4 most important years of my life. And I don't know if that can change because of where it was and what it meant. Now, I'll have these really cool things, and you may ask me about some stories along the way that may seem like it's more than being off exit 181 here in Wood County, Ohio. But it's not, because those things cannot come to pass without those 8 semesters that I spent here.
So how did your time at BGSU kind of prepare you for the real world?
Yeah, because it's real here. I mean, the thing that's wonderful, I hope still, about Bowling Green is that it can be as little or as much as you make it. It's still a place where you can go and decide what your academic path is going to be, and then do 12 things that have nothing to do with that. I thought I was going to come here and play baseball. I got cut the first time, and then won 4 intramural softball championships because I got cut with 10 other dudes, and we ended up playing softball together for 4 years. I was in student government for 4 years. I was a student trustee. I was a two-term president of the student body, and played in pep band for 2 years. I mean, there's just all this. I was an RA for a year. I don't know if I was great at any of them, but I did a lot of stuff. For me, first it was, let me maximize this experience. I shouldn't leave here on, I believe, the 7th day of May in 1994. I shouldn't leave here with any regret, any hope, any thought that there was something else I could have done. And all those things should have been out of my reach, like chemistry. Like if there was something I didn't do, it wasn't meant for me. And I think that was the only thing I wanted to feel. Student government was easy because I'd done that since elementary school. Music was going to happen. I come from a musical family. I decided in high school, I was a junior in high school when I got a taste of our instructional television program at Princeton High School, right down Interstate 75 in Cincinnati. And so I was really focused, a little too serious, but I caught up with the fun. The fun found its way after, because for the last almost 40 years, I go to arenas and ballparks and stadiums for free, and they pay me to be there. And to be able to recognize that there are millions and millions of people, with my skill set or not, who would trade places with me, that gives you pause. And you realize, man, let me put it this way. I've had the pleasure of working for Pat Riley, who's one of the great sports figures of all time, not just his time in the NBA. We're about to celebrate his 30th year as the president and at times coach of the Miami Heat. And he has a billion lines, and I steal them all. So here's one of them, is that we work in the toy store of human affairs. And I think what he means by that is that we all kind of get to play while, there's wars going on, right? The way our political discourse is probably at its worst it's ever been in American history. We're trying to figure out how we should identify with people in connection to how they identify with themselves. These are just a few things I'm touching on that are all really hard and complicated. Winning and losing, or as we call it, winning in misery, is not something that's super complicated, and it's a lot about effort. Sure, it's skill. You have to have a talent, but it is a lot about energy and effort and a will to win. And then sometimes you do everything you can to win. and someone else is just better. And the stories that wrap around that, the reactions that come with that, the preparation that leads into that, I'm making it all sound far more complicated than it is because we should justify our work path to some degree. My wife and I are both in athletics, and we call it, what's the term we protect the fantasy or defend the fantasy. That my wife works at the University of Miami. I work for the Miami Heat. The key word in all of that is work. And eventually when you're at work, things aren't always awesome. But that's not our job to tell everyone what's not awesome. It's that when you do have this responsibility or this wonderful gift of working in a space that for the most part, now, since I started telling stories about sports versus now telling stories about sports, I think we've penetrated a path that's very personal. And that's because sometimes that's what the audience wants more than anything else. I am so glad that I call games for a living. My employer is the Miami Heat. I do not work for Odyssey radio station group. I do not work for Bally, and thank God I don't work for Bally, and that's no offense to the people who work at Bally. It's just they're the company that purchased all of that because some presidents, DOJ decided Disney shouldn't own every regional sports network in the country. It turned into a mess, and I don't work in a mess. I work for one of the awesome families who own a sports team, who has one of the great leaders in sports history. And by the way, my head coach is another one of those people. And so it's just a blessing. And by the way, there's a lot of sunshine. So it's actually a great place to live on the shores of Miami Beach.
Well, let's talk about Miami Heat. You know, an incredible organization, like you've been mentioning, and you've spent now 2 decades plus now with the team. How did that opportunity come about when you started with the team, and kind of just go more in depth about just your time with the organization and all the roles that you've done for them?
So fortunate to everyone who's in this room, and you asking me that question, I have become much more mature about answering this question because me getting to the Miami Heat was on the backside of possibly the worst personal and professional moment of my life. I had become, really at 4 years old, it was evident that something remarkable was going to happen in my life. Nobody could tell, who knew? But I was at Case Western Reserve's music school settlement, so basically nursery school for people that they think are going to be musicians, right? At 4. And if you got the lead to the play as a 4-year-old, the play was named after you. So it was Jason the Great was the name of this play. And I was a musician, and I turned princes into frogs and all this fun stuff. And so when it just came to the decision of, okay, now let's fast forward 13 years, 14 years. What am I going to do for a living? I love baseball. Loved baseball since the beginning of anything athletic I can remember. And then once I got to high school, baseball decided it was not going to love me back anymore. And then I get to college, and literally Coach Schmidt, it was his first, literally his first thing he did was, I keep telling him, it was the first thing he did was cut me, but it was a lot of people at the same time. It was his first year, leading into 25 years? Coach was here. And so anyway, when I told my father I wanted to coach baseball for a living, teach U.S. history, as a high school teacher to do that, I'll just say it the way he said it. I will not subsidize the education of another educator. Pick something else. My father was an English major at Central State University down in Wilberforce, taught for almost 2 years. I was born. And what I took from that was, you like nice things. If you want nice things and that's the thing that's going to drive you, then this is not what you are going to do. My mother taught 3rd grade for 33 years. My grandmother, my mom's mom was a teacher. So all of that was there. So I was like, my feelings were hurt. Like I didn't second think. So back then we took the Myers-Briggs assessment. I don't know if that's still something that's available. It aligns your personality with professions. Okay. And so the very next thing on that list was broadcaster. And we had an instructional television program there. And so think about this. 16 years old, I decide I want to be a broadcaster. I go through 2 more years of high school, not even fully 2, 1.5 years of high school, 4 years of college. And as soon as I'm done here, I get a really cool job as a sports reporter and anchor in the 15th biggest market in the nation, right out of here. Matter of fact, when I got hired by the Fox affiliate in Miami, WSVN, they wanted me to leave immediately. It was March. They wanted me there for May sweeps, and I was like, man, I want to finish school. And so I told them, well, I'm a first-generation college graduate. It's really important for me to finish school, and I finished on the 7th. Problem is, I was a third-generation college graduate. That was not the case, but I used it as the first story I got to tell that got me through, right? And that went really quickly. That was 18 months. I was there, and ESPN came calling, and I was there for 7 years. What happened at ESPN was I learned the most important things about television. I learned the mechanism of how a massive worldwide leader, I know they're trying to shed that title now, but the worldwide leader in sports production and event production, quite honestly, how you do it. I tell everybody all the time, I got my BAC at Bowling Green, I got a master's degree in Miami, Florida, and I got a PhD in Bristol, Connecticut on television production. And in that 7-year period, I went from imposter syndrome in the beginning, because I'm 23 years old, anchoring the 2:30 a.m. At that point, it was the 2:30 a.m. half-hour Sports Center. And I wasn't prepared. I'm not going to kid you. I mean, 18 months of sports reporting, live reports here and there, and features every week, and filling in, anchoring every now, does not prepare you to write a half hour, and then 6 months after that, hour, basically the sports show of record for that time. And it was appointment viewing 3 times a day, and it was, as Charlie Steiner, who now calls games for the Dodgers, said, "Kid, you got the last seat on the space shuttle." And it really was. I was the 23rd anchor hired for SportsCenter before it really exploded. ESPN2 was happening, but they had Sports Desk. And so in that short period of time, after I kind of got my feet underneath me and really got into a pocket of covering the NBA, that was probably 2 years later, the folly of youth gets in the way. And you're making a boatload of money, you have a lot of notoriety, people love you, you're not recognizing the people that actually love you, and the people who say they love you because of what you're doing, not who you are. And that led to the end of my run there. And it's a really, you'll edit, I'm sure, but it's the shittiest feeling to have to call up your parents and tell them that your dream job is now no more because of your own behavior. Or turn to your wife, and we have 2 babies and a ridiculous mortgage and 2 cars and the whole bit. And it was 2 years in the wilderness. And one of them was here, by the way. We left Connecticut, and my wife took a job here at BG, which makes like total sense, right? To like resettle yourself. And my wife's in athletics and still is now, and came in and did some academic advising. But here's the blessing of things, is that while I would have loved a more subtle message on how I needed to alter how I was going about life and living it at the time, I'm glad I had it, because the shift to Miami, while I told you the most important 4 years of my life was here, the most important decision we made was making that move. And our sons, while they were born in Connecticut, they only know Miami. They only know that experience. Man, I got hired as the host and reporter for the Miami Heat as they traded for Shaquille O'Neal, and there's nothing larger than life. And we'd already known each other from my ESPN NBA responsibilities, and so once they traded for Shaquille, they wanted a big show. And so pregame, halftime, and postgame became mine, walk-off interviews, storytelling on the court. Some kid by the name of Dwayne Wade was starting to explode upon the scene, and now I have the pleasure of being a part of the ceremony to put this forever statue on the front steps of the west side of our building. And it's like, after a while, it's like, man, I almost screwed this whole thing up. And I had the blessing of getting into a place that allowed me, by the way, to really thrive. Like they never told me no about projects that they probably should have. And I have a ridiculous approach to it that's not like anybody else. I'm a bit of a catchphrase freak, and I love to laugh, and it's worked out, man. It's worked out, and that's the really cool thing.
Well, obviously you wore many different hats in your time in Miami, broadcasters, silent reporter, whatever it may be, and you've seen plenty of wins. You've seen plenty of losses. You've seen championships. All of that. You've seen the greatest players to ever play NBA. You've seen LeBron James. You've seen Dwayne Wade. You've seen Shaquille O'Neal, Chris Bosh. Just to name the players that have history for the Miami Heat. Do you have a favorite game that you've called before in your 20 years? Do you have a signature moment in your career that you kind of reflect on and you're like, yeah, that's the game. That's the game that I want to be defined by?
Well, it's interesting because I'm only in my fourth year. I'm just a senior as it pertains to calling games. I never thought I was going to be a play-by-play announcer. It just wasn't something that I was interested in, nor did it find its way to me. I think I called a Bowling Green game once when we lived here for a year, for like a hamburger and $75, something like that. And I'm a host. I'm a carnival barker. I tell you when to come in the tent, entertain you while you're in the tent, tell you to get out of the tent, tell you where the tent's going to be the next time. And I really kind of mastered that. And when the opportunity came to call games, I was like, man, let me try something different. I was 49 at the time, and I'm like, man, how many times in your life, let alone your career, someone's going to challenge you with something different out of your comfort zone in the latter third or fourth of your career? And so I hopped all over it. I didn't give up television because I'm vain, and I like being on TV. And so, but the long workday of television on pregame, call the game on radio, television on postgame is daunting. As you noted earlier, if I was 48, 49 then, I'll be 53 at the end of this season, and it doesn't get easier. This is thankful to all the people gathered in this room. It is a young person's occupation. The days are long, the nights are late. Traveling is not always awesome until you get to the highest level of it. And so I say all that to say, the greatest game that I've ever been a part of, I didn't call, but I got to chronicle. And it's when we won the championship in 2006. We had lost the first two games. The mayor of Dallas was planning the parade. They had the sheriff and fire chief and chief of police. They were ready to go. And we won the next 4 games in a row. And on that night, in the middle of July, in 2006, when Dwayne Wade held that basketball and threw it up in the air, his time expired, it was so funky because I had already covered 5 NBA finals. But this was the first one I had covered as a member of something that was actually in the arena. I'm not a player, I'm not a coach, but I am this professional observer, this gatekeeper, this chronicler for what we now refer to as Heat Nation. And it's a really unique responsibility. And so when I was in the locker room with our second year starting power forward, and I had no idea we'd be together for 18 more years after that, but I'm in the back of the locker room with Udonis Haslem. And Udonis didn't get drafted. He's from Miami. He was a damn near All-American at Florida, but he wasn't ready for the NBA. He was a bigger guy. The Heat kind of, back then you could still take undrafted players under your wing. You didn't really cut him a contract or anything. Like, hey man, you go to Europe and then come on back. And so he goes to France, changes his entire body. I hope you guys just pull the stuff off Getty and put it side by side of Udonis' senior year at Florida and then Udonis as an Adonis after he put his body together. He's sitting in the back of the locker room because he's from the part of Miami where you don't see the club. You don't get your toe in the sand, right? You don't get the glitz and glamour of the town. West side of Interstate 95. And he's sitting in the back and he's holding the trophy and our camera's all foggy and champagne everywhere, which by the way, it only burns for a moment. It only burns your eyes for a moment. But we're in the back and we're talking and he starts bawling. Like here's this hard-ass man who had to change his entire physique to just make this bit of a dream come true. And it all came true because not only did he have to leave, come back, make the team, become a starter, he was now a champion. And that happened in 18, 19 months. And he's back there balling. He's the hardest ass man I've ever been around. And we're not that far apart in age. And he spoke of how no one ever gave him anything. That no one gave him a chance except for the Miami Heat. He did the most with that opportunity. And it's all any of us want. We may never become NBA champions, but if we want to shoot camera, if we want to interview people, if we want to write, if we want to produce, all you ever want is someone to believe in you that much so that you can blow them away with hopefully your talent, but damn sure better be your energy and effort. And that is phenomenal. So just it's something that'll stay with me forever. And the game basically where Udonis retired, we just got our asses kicked in the NBA Finals by the Denver Nuggets, and we're standing in the hallway, and then I'm just like, let me interview Udonis one more time. Like, I know he's retiring. And at the end of the interview, he looked right into the camera, out of context, no reference whatsoever, and he just goes, and yes, I did cry in the locker room. And I looked at him, and I was like, it took me a second to go, what the hell is he talking about? Holy shit. It just admitted what he, like, for the entirety of his career. Whenever it came up, he would not admit that it happened. But in that moment, he wanted to leave this lasting understanding of what it had all meant to him. And so that is the longest freaking answer to your question about my favorite game, which was Game 6 of the 2006 NBA championship.
That's unbelievable. That's an incredible story. And you mentioned earlier in the answer that this profession is kind of a young person's game, or there's a lot of up and coming, young journalists, people my age, people our age. And it's no secret that, broadcasting and journalism and social media has all changed from since when you were in school, and it's constantly changing and will continue to change. What's a trait or a tool that you think us young journalists, whether we're going into broadcasting, we want to be a beat reporter, we want to be a videographer, what trait do we need to have, in your opinion, that in order for us to be successful once we leave, once our 4 or 5 years, how many years we have here is up, and we go out into the real world?
There are only two things. There's only two. If you haven't done it, or if you're smart like my wife and you tested out of it, if you haven't taken an English composition class, first year students, you're good. It's still like right where you should be. For those of you that have aged out of that, go back and take it. It was 112, I believe, or 111, English 111. I'm sure it's changed by now. The most important class I took, because it taught me how to, and this is different, it sounds like semantics, but stay with me. There's a difference between summary and synthesis. Summary, this is my single degree estimation. Main idea, point, closing thought. Synthesis is what we do. You're still taking those 5 elements, but now we're weaving them together, right? We're telling a tale. There might even be a little tributary we go down over here and come back. But we were given this density of stuff, these 20-page articles, and we get 1 page to, again, synthesize, bring together and intertwine not just the stuff we were doing literally months earlier in high school. And I was so pissed that I did not test out of 111, mostly because my girlfriend at the time was in 112, but also because I'm competitive, right? But I'm so glad I didn't skip that step. It's ridiculous. Here I am telling you about something that happened 34 years ago, and I will never forget how important it was to humble myself and recognize I did not know everything about writing. And writing for broadcasting, that was my thing. I'm ready. I can do this. You have 30 seconds, I'll give you the world. I'll do it. But to think it through and really take the tonnage of information to make sure that you don't miss anything in your summary versus synthesis, which, by the way, you're only given the same amount of time. But what are the unique nuances and turns of phrases that you can utilize to get people from one place to another? The second thing is you will work every single day of your life that you choose to if you can edit video and audio. If you can do that, you will eat, you will pay your rent, you will not miss a car payment. Editing in our business will never change. It'll never change. I don't care if you work at TikTok or if you work at Channel 07 in Miami or if you work at ESPN. If you master that and then you continue to stay with the trends or maintain, don't even be trendy, maintaining an eye on creativity and trying to do something different to present ideas or storylines, I just believe even when you get away from it, and I haven't edited anything in way too long. I'm not going to say how long it is. But it was the reason why I got my first job. I skipped 150 markets because I could edit. And a guy sitting in Miami who was preoccupied with President Clinton being in town and gave me a stack of tapes and said, give me a minute 30. And in his mind, as the news director, he just wanted a script. But when I was done, he got script and a tape. Because that's all I knew. That's it. Like a minute 30, cool, let's go get it, we're done. And that naivety or lack of knowing what he wanted or lack of his communication because he was preoccupied, that's what got me the job. Not because I was super talented or that there was some trajectory you could see for my career. It's at the baseline, can you get something on the air with a deadline? And if you can do that, you will work.
Is there something that you wish you would have known during your time at Bowling Green, or maybe when you're just starting out in your young professional career, that you wish you knew, that's something that you know now?
The only reason I'm hesitating is that I really knew what I was getting into. I loved the people who did what I do. And so I was prepared to be loved by the people. And the people that didn't love it oftentimes don't say anything to you, not to your face at least. So you can kind of float around thinking, everybody digs you and the work that you do. So I'm always honest about the performance part of this. If you want to be in front of these microphones and cameras, you are a performer. And if you are a performer, you crave people watching you perform. And I very much enjoy that part of it and the exchange that comes with it. So I take seriously my preparation for it so that I'm not wasting their time. If there was anything that you know what? Thank you. You got me there. I wish I knew that it just wasn't hard work that got you through. I thought you could basically say, be, and do anything if you worked really hard. But while it's important to do, and it will be a part of anyone's elevation, your demise comes from not recognizing, and this is probably more for me than you all because you're living it, but you'll be in my position at some point where there's more time behind you than in front of you, is that oftentimes people's perceptions of you and your work don't come from the people that you're working around. It's not your crew. It's not necessarily even your direct supervisor. It might just be someone who's just gazing from afar. And they see either something that's inconsistent with the organization or inconsistent with your persona or not recognize that you can be a person and have a persona. And those are those little blind spots. I just didn't realize that would be a thing because I'm like, well, listen, if I'm doing my thing and everybody digs my thing and I bust my ass doing it, then that come on, all the live long day on that one. But there is a responsibility. There's a whole nother layer of responsibility that even though most of us who get in front of the camera, we don't hire anybody, we don't manage anybody, we don't fire anybody, but there is just kind of this beacon that radiates from you when you decide this position, and there's a responsibility that comes with it that's farther than hello everybody and good night.
You talked about kind of that responsibility, and in this field particularly, it can be kind of hard with how many people that see your work. You're in the public eye. You're on TV. You're broadcasting games. So those people have judgments of you, and they'll critique you from afar. And people make the argument that it only gets worse because now that there's no social media, everyone has a platform. And so everyone can comment on your work, whether they know you or they don't know you. How do you deal with that?
I don't care. That's top of the list. Like I really don't. Like it's one of the things that I am super self-aware about my skill set. Like you don't have to tell me if I was great today. And then, by the way, that's the way I look at it. Like I'm still a show by show, only as good as the last thing I did person. And that's, you have to be that way or you just won't survive, right? I prefer that everybody love everything I think of, say, and do. I prefer that. I also am wise enough to know that that's just not going to happen, and that's okay. Because I'm going to do it again tomorrow. I'm going to do it again in a couple minutes. I'm going to do it again, for me at the end of a season 6 months later, right? It's not the thing, but we are assessed every single night. I have 82 regular season games. I have 6 preseason games. I have hopefully 20 plus playoff games and 2 TV shows to do around all of those things. So multiply that, right? So if I got hung up on, Jax, why don't you toss in a salad, on social media, then I probably should be doing something else, And I love confrontation. I'll get right in there and say, well, tell your mom to make my salad with some chicken on it, and so I don't mind that interplay. Now, yes, my wife hates that I engage in those things, but I enjoy it. Text message tough guys or Twitter. It's X now, but yeah, I used to call them Twitter tough guys and gals. Only dudes doing that. That entertains me to some level. So I think if you take on this role, you have to accept that. Yeah.
With your time at ESPN, your time at the Miami Heat, even your time here, has there been a colleague or colleagues that have impacted you greatly and that you've worked with, whether it's in your profession, but you as a person as well, that you will forever cherish?
Yeah, there's probably 4, but damn near all of them. Like you get something from everybody. It may be the way that they prepare. It may be the way they perform. It may be how they get away from it that you envy. But the first 3 were the guys that I interned for in Cincinnati. And it was a gift. I got one of the great writers of all time. I got one of the great stars, like someone who just commands their space in front of a camera. And I had a guy that I could relate to, Bill Hemmer, who's on Fox News in the morning. We were closer in age than the other 2, but I got a little taste of everybody's skill set. And they were incredibly important to me understanding, first of all, how to write to video. Writing to video and writing are totally different. And that's John Popovich is the best ever I've ever seen do it. And I don't care how many people know or don't know him. If you ever came across him, that was a gift to you. Dennis Jansen was just a complete people person. And he had every phrase for every moment. And it's just great to still have him in my life and as a friend. And Hemmer's spirit was so connected to mine because you're young and ambitious and you think you can take over the world. Then when I got to ESPN, Dan Patrick was probably the most important person. Craig Kilborn in many ways, because while Killer is like basically a comedian who went on to do comedy stuff, he had the mechanism of SportsCenter down. And I was doing too much, and he really helped me dwindle the concept of what you're trying to accomplish each night. But Dan's from Ohio, and it just felt right. And he was tough on me because he cared. And he was heartbroken when I got fired, even more so than me. I was like, hey, Dan, take it easy. He's really he always cussed me out about it. And I'm like, remember, you still work there. You're good. I'm the one that's going to have to grind out of this. But I think that's when you realize that you have a friend. That's not just a mentor or just a colleague. But Dan did a great job. I think I do this. I think I've kind of moved into a whole nother space. But I enjoyed how, as the straight man, back in these days, you guys should study. This literally should be a class, The Big Show, with Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann. They had a run of 5 or 6 years of just some of the most wonderful, not just highlight show stuff, but just storytelling and the way that SportsCenter did it at that time. Our attention span doesn't work that way anymore, so the shows don't work that way. But he was just kind of the straight guy on that. But man, he still was fun and funny and could do it. And I thought that that was my position. And I'm not really a straight guy. You know, kind of this, I don't know, what are the words you use? I mean, I'm just kind of this entity that just can move to wherever I need to be. If it requires being serious, I can be serious. But if I see any opening to be ridiculous, I'm jumping all over that every single time, every single time.
And you have a lot of career left. You've been doing this for a long time. What's the biggest life lesson you've learned throughout your years?
Yeah, that's interesting, man. I just never forget what our responsibility is. I think, now I've talked it in our conversation about really kind of how unimportant it is, toy store and that type of stuff. Particularly if you get into sports. Remember how the day goes for your viewer or listener. Let's just say your game starts at 7:30. Your pregame starts at 7 or earlier, whatever. Most of the people, all they're looking forward to in their day is that time. It is their escape from work, parenting, relationships. Those things may even be good. For most people, they're just regular to bad. And that they look for this escape. They oftentimes do it in sport and or entertainment, which is what we are. And it is the most important thing to them in the day. That's not to be judged. That's to be served. And our job is to take all of this information, all of this access they would climb over other humans for and present it to them in a way that is both informative and entertaining for the next 3 hours. And that should be the biggest deal that there is.
Obviously, with this profession, you travel a lot, and you've probably traveled all around the country. You've probably been to places around the world. Yeah. What are just some of your favorite places that you've gone to in your career?
My favorite. So I love Los Angeles. I don't know what it is about LA. I just always have loved LA. I think it's the film part of radio, television, and film, I guess. I grew up loving films. I think I was like 9 when I figured out what's the gig I could do where I don't have to memorize lines and all this other stuff. And there used to be this thing called I think it was either continuity director or continuity producer. And you literally had to just be in charge of that drum set in take 35 was right there, but in take 36 it was over there. So we got to go back and put the drum set over there. Like that was a job, right? I'm sure it still is, but it's not entitled that way. So I just wanted to be in movies. So there's just something about Los Angeles that I absolutely dig. There's nothing like playing in Madison Square Garden when they start chanting, "Let's go Heat." So, I mean, I had worked in that building. Listen, Knicks fans are probably the most savvy, just good basketball appreciating fans, even when it's not happening from their team. But Heat Nation became something different in the summer of 2010 when LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh started playing together. And we're everywhere. We're everywhere. A whole generation of fans love our team because for 4 years we were in the mix to be champions, and twice we won it for 3 total championships in our history. And because of that, there's no corner of this globe that we go to without having Heat fans. But in the Garden, I'm always expecting that all of the affinity will radiate eventually back to the Knicks. And on the rare occasion that it does not, when we're playing, it is fantastic. As for the international stuff, just all of it. Like to be able to, like I've been to London, Paris, Rio, Shanghai, Beijing, Mexico City a few times, Toronto every year. And I wouldn't have gone to, I don't have that type of, to the demise of my family. I don't like to travel in the off season because I just spent 6 to 8 months traveling. So I wouldn't have gone to any of those places without basketball. And so I'm glad that I've gone to see Christ the Redeemer and the Great Wall of China and all of these really neat things. The Champs-Élysées, is that how you say it? In the middle of Paris, and Big Ben, and all that stuff was because of orange leather.
Well, this is the last question for me before I turn it over to our audience and
Sure.
see if they have any questions. You mentioned the importance of a responsibility we have in terms of being a broadcaster, reporter, just an overall storyteller, and what being a journalist is. What one piece of advice that you have for all of us in the room that eventually will leave this place and want to make a mark in the journalism world, what piece of advice would you want to give us?
Yeah, it kind of connects to what I said before. Try very hard not to make it about you. It's almost impossible. It's almost impossible, but try really hard not to make it about you and remember who you're doing it for. And it's not the player. It isn't. It's not the coach. It's not the franchise. It is the fan. None of us get to exist without fans. That's the way it goes. That fans get in the seats, the advertisers love the eyeballs, the ones that are in the seats, they're watching at home. That's how you get a ridiculous gazillion-dollar contract. And all of that comes back to what we all once were at one point if you're covering sports. So it's super relatable. So you don't have to, just never disconnect from how you feel and or felt about your favorite team, and you will always have the right barometer. I think about Heat Live only as I think about being a viewer of Reds Live. What do I want to hear from? What don't I want to hear after a loss? What is the very last thing that I want to hear about anything after a loss? I think about that when we're building our ideas and our content. And that stuff will drive you without hesitation. You will find your hand coming off the rudder. You don't need it because it's pulsing within you. So if you don't ever lose your fandom, there's a level of professionalism that you have to develop. But that should always stay inside you, and it'll guide you correctly.
Awesome. Amazing. We'd love to open up to questions.
Yes, sir.
So like when it comes to interviewing players and what what's some of the best advice you have when it comes to conducting interviews, just asking questions?
For the first decade of your career, and then somewhere in there you might say, well, Jax told me, all my friends call me Jax, by the way, Jax, so feel free. That I remember that really cool advice Jax gave me about writing down my questions. And there will come a point where you just recognize that you didn't. And that interview will be one of the days that you kind of hit in your timeline that I just had the 3 or 4 ideas. They were there and ready to go. But until that day, have no shame in writing them down, looking down, reading, like whatever it takes in the beginning to be clean. That's what you're trying to do first. And if you want the cheat code, as we all do in life, is that listen to the game while it's happening. If you're not the play-by-play announcer or color announcer, you'll hear the themes even if you're not participating in the call. And you just maintain those things. Listen, availability is always at the top of the list. So injury becomes the things that you want to get to, stellar performance, historical landmark, milestones, those type of things. And then there's always something, right? There's always something in a game that turns it one way or another, and you're always waiting for that moment. There's a rare sport that doesn't have it, right? I don't cover soccer. I don't cover hockey. So I don't have these games that have low scores, right? So I don't have ties. Ain't no ties where I come from, right? So it's not to knock those as sports that they're wonderful sports, obviously. Football is the world sport that we're trying to catch in the NBA, and I don't think there's any rival in the playoffs to NHL playoffs. Like, it's a whole nother layer. It's just ridiculous on a whole nother level. So there's a quality to all of that. But I think writing and committing to your thoughts first, and then you'll find your way that it becomes a bit of osmosis.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You've been doing sports media for a long time, so broadcasting specifically, what is your biggest advice for prepping for games, prepping for big events?
Yeah. By the way, it stinks. What am I about to tell you? It's so much reading. It is just so much reading. We get this thing in the NBA called Sports Scan. It is an article about every team from every newspaper in America. And if you print it out, it's like 75 pages every day. Like, even outside of the season, this thing is available. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't read this shit anymore. No, I don't read it at all. My team, I know my team, right? Twitter/X is my friend, right? I have a list called Heatbeat, and I have a list called NBA. And before I go to bed, and when I wake up in the morning, I read those things. Sports Scan makes you feel good because you know everything about everything. But when you're covering like games, like you just, man, focus on the two teams. Like, and particularly if you don't work for either team, you know, you're just dropping in and doing a women's college basketball game, and you don't have an affiliation to either team. Man, just like bury yourself up to your neck on and like draw a line, like the last week's feature stories, the last week's box scores. Spend time talking to people who like talking to you. Head coaches do not want to talk to you. Head athletic trainers do not want to talk to you. You know who loves talking to you? The assistant coach, the assistant trainer. They don't have the outlet for it. And as you build those relationships and you prove yourself not to be a sieve, but someone who is just getting background so that you understand exactly why something may have happened, but you can frame it a little bit differently because you have an idea of what went down. It's not, hey, I spoke to, that's one of, like, if there's a lot, we all have like hands on a chalkboard. Well, you guys don't. Anybody even know what a chalkboard is anymore? But nails on a chalkboard, like whatever irritates you from a noise standpoint, one of those things, I have two, and it's talk about, tell me about, talk about. That's not a question, that's a statement. And then the other one is, I spoke to so-and-so and they told me. Well, just tell me. I mean, all of a sudden you just became like the pristine reporter of the universe because you had to access every single person who has a credential here has. And mostly because you work for a national network and in your contract you get 30 minutes with the most prominent people in the room. And it's those are performative things that I think get in the way of you just being ready, you know? And the cool thing is that as you cover teams, those relationships, as you already know now, they just develop. They're just naturally developing, and particularly when you're the same age as the players. And you all will be now the same age as the players for the next 15 years. And then you will turn into their aunts and uncles. And then you'll be me when you're their parents. And it's a different approach in each of those modes, right? I'm not hanging out and going to dinner with anybody anymore. And it's a different approach. But I don't feel ill-prepared, right? I just feel like a little more guiding, quite honestly, for our young players than I am, where are we going, you know? It's a really good question. Yes.
So you mentioned that the importance your family has is very big throughout your entire life. But in this line of work, there's always so much that can take away from seeing family.
Brother's the worst. It's the worst. I don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
My second son's birthday is December 1st. He's 21. I've been home for 3. I want to cry right now. Like, it is. I just won't get it back. But everything that's good in our lives, from a material opportunity standpoint, comes from me being gone on December 1st. So it's a tough measure. Get a great partner. Like that's what's key. But yeah, man, the thing that's crushing me now more than anything is that I've been doing this for 30 years. And every August, my life is dictated by someone else. The schedule comes out, and I'm like, yeah, there it goes. Like this year, man, I am home for Thanksgiving, I'm home for Christmas, I'm home for New Year's. I think I'm even home for Easter, which like that's not even a holiday. It's a super important holiday in my universe, but it's just like I don't even expect that one. And so this year's so ridiculously different that way. Sacrifice, man. It's the easiest word to utter. It sounds awesome when you say it, but when you're doing it, or you say you're going to do it and don't, that's the stuff. That's the stuff. I'm just getting older and I'm super sentimental, so I don't want to put you guys in a space where I don't want you to think it's awesome. It's just as daunting. Like that's the part of it where you're giving yourself to something that can't on an individual basis give it back. That's why I love working for a team. Like when I worked at a TV station, when I worked at a national network, man, the 1st and the 15th was legitimately your thank you, your pat on the back, the acknowledgement that you're doing well. I mean, I work for a guy now that's not a very big pat on the backy guy, man. But when we sit down to do my contract, man, I'm like, yes, he's still happy. Things are still going well. And you just have to accept that that's the dynamic. The other cool thing is, you know, I don't know if you guys know Florida well, but our major grocery store chain is Publix. And Publix tells me everything I need to know about what the Heat fans care about me and our team. That beautiful exchange of being around people who love what you're doing or love the product. And that's the thing that you have to be able to kind of work between. Is having the reality, your feet on the ground, that people love the team. It's not you. They love the team. It's not even really the players. It's the association to something that we all got this Miami on our chest or this Heat on our chest or these parades or this statue that we're about to unveil for the greatest player in the history of our team. Those are the types of things that make it worth all of the time that most people are doing something else. I love that I don't work 9 to 5. I'm not a morning person, number one. Number two, I love being off all summer. I really do. I kid my mother, who doesn't like being kid, that we have the same schedule and very disproportionate income. So I try not to make that joke with her too much because she doesn't think it's funny. But it's a great, I tell people all the time, it sounds like just a slick thing that somebody would say. It is the best job if you can get it. And it is. It is. I feel like I need therapy now, man. You just ran me through some shit right there. What's up, bud?
When people reach out to you, like asking for advice and questions, like often like us nurses, what are some questions that you like want to hear that are like kind of like unique? And like I know like some people like ask like cookie cutter like basic. So, like what kind of questions like stick out and like get you want to answer and build a connection?
So, as the wonder child of this experience, you've tapped into the worst part of me as a broadcaster. I am not naturally inquisitive. I don't naturally care, which doesn't seem like, I don't mean that in a bad way. Like I love exchange. I love connection. I love being in contact. Like seriously, when I walked in the room and saw how many of you were here, like I was so warmed and touched by the fact that people still want to learn this profession and not just sprint to it. You know what I mean? Like just get their own YouTube channel or be on TikTok, and you guys can do that. But the fact that you're learning about the mental aspects of what we do and how it impacts people, the viewing patterns of people and when and how they're doing it now in an era that is unlike any other era of gathering news and information. Those are really important things to have as a part of your universal mind that you're developing as content creators. So I don't know if I'm ever looking for a good question. I just like when I get questions. You know, I just want somebody, I don't want somebody like coming to me looking for, you know, like the golden goose answer, because there isn't one. There's a path that's different for my path was still like ridiculous. And the only reason I got it, well, there's 3 reasons. One, I put myself in position, I was really focused at your age to be a sports broadcaster. Like I was really narrow to it. I wasn't just going to go do news. I wasn't just going to do the weather. I wasn't going to do entertainment until it got like, you know, down to it. I probably would, but I was very fortunate and it went exactly the way that I hoped. And then I got to jump off a trampoline into apparently a rocket ship, as Charlie Steiner once said. And so it doesn't really always go that way, you know? And then in year 10 of my career, I go from the comforts and confines of teleprompters and makeup artists and 7 hours to write my scripts to remote television live broadcasting where, quite honestly, I've been very blunt with you all, hope I can continue to do this, is that your ass is on fire for 2.5 hours. You know, you have your notes, you have your preparation, but the words are, that's what's there. These little blank, the red lights come on, you better have a red light fetish, all right? Because that's what I have. Red light comes on and it is showtime and I am ready to go. I can be sick, I can be angry, I can be sad, but when that light comes on, it is Pavlovian. Like I am ready to dance. And that may be the gift that I was given. I've never even thought about it that way. But getting back to the full circle thing, I don't think there's anything that's going to be specific that you all can ask when you have a practitioner in front of you other than what is most interesting to you about the path you think you want to walk. And let me talk about that for just a quick second. There are 5 on-air full-time staff members at Miami Heat Broadcasting. There are 20 of us in the department. Another 40 people join us on game day. How many jobs did I just say that were not on air? Almost 40, right? So being on air is awesome. We get paid the most. I don't know why that is, but I'm glad that's how it works for me. But without my director, without my producer, without camera operators who care, without video operators who are serious, without audio guys who have ears from God, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. So the level of appreciation that you have for you and your work being the front-facing individual, you better have for the other 50 people that are working behind you, or you will not do this long. It's just not feasible. And that's not a threat. That's just, like, you can't not recognize the pyramid of which you are standing upon and think that it will be the rocks that it should be versus the house of cards it probably really is. We are all working in unison to try to create something that is perfect, which is impossible. But some nights we do it, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And I've only recently gotten better about the parts that don't go well. I'm not perfect, like even close to perfect. But I didn't, for the majority of my career, handle other people's mistakes well. And it doesn't make someone better. There's not one person that shows up to work on a professional live or studio or live to tape broadcast going, I am going to do my absolute worst today. I'm going to clip Jason's microphone today. I'm going to go to black early. I'm going to roll the commercial late. I'm going to keep the microphone open when someone drops an F-bomb. Like, no one is doing those things on purpose, I presume, for the most part. So you just have to have some grace because you may need it yourself. I know. I didn't answer your question at all. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
What's some of your biggest advice for us in our shoes when it comes to networking for our features?
Yeah. First of all, do as much of what you're doing as you possibly can. Like, I mean, I'm a little concerned that your professors are in the room and instructors, but they know what I'm saying is true. Sacrifice everything to call these games. Everything. I don't care. Yeah, I don't care if you have your final and you have to go to Muncie, Indiana to call a baseball game. You square up on your professor or TA and work it out because you cannot give up reps. The repetition of doing this, writing, calling games, producing games, it's the only thing that makes the second nature. The second nature is what builds your confidence. That's what's going to get you into a spot to then compete with the 100 people, 200 people, 500 people. They're trying to get that one singular job that's going to get you into the game. And then once you're in the game, you're going to realize there's another game inside the game. And the game inside the game is where you can network. Like, that's the place where you really want to network. And it's really the worst part of our industry, and it's the consultant, talent, agent space. And when you're trying to get into the business early and in a small market, you'll see it once you're in, because they'll hire these people from outside, spend time on diction, spend time on storytelling, spend time on presentation. Ladies, I apologize, it's the worst part of the freaking industry. Hair and makeup will be something you have to spend time on, and your male colleagues won't spend 10 seconds on it. But when you're with those individuals, those are the star makers. They're basically headhunters for everybody else in every other career. But I stopped the talent agent stuff when I got to Miami. I just stopped. Man, it's 10% of my cash, okay? Last time I checked, and I believe it's the last book of the Old Testament, it's Malachi, and I believe that's the only tithing, I believe, that was it needed for grace on high. But if you are in the ambitious part of your career, it's required. It just is. There is no fairy godmother coming down going, hey, Adam Amin, you're 23 years old a decade ago, and you were going to call games on Fox. As good as Adam was, he still had an agent, that puts him in position. There's people who are watching positions while you're watching the growth in your career. And at some point, you need that. I was very fortunate. I got someone who believed in me that way when I was still here. And she was an agent at a talent firm in New York. And what I did, guys, and I think you guys can do this very same thing. Hold on one second. Well, they'll figure it out. It's the thing that you have to realize is what's important to you, you have to focus on, right? It's the writing, the editing, the identification of the right story if you're out in the world just doing beat reporting, or identification of how do you best want to communicate what's happening. If you're doing radio, you're painting pictures. If you're doing television, how do you do that without being too present? There's just all that little stuff. To have someone else beating the pavement for the next job and the job after the job is just a reality of our business. And it's super, it frustrates the hell out of me. I don't think it should be that way, but it was that way before I got there. This is the way it is. Yes.
You mentioned how big of a jump you had going right from college into reporting and anchoring right away. I was just wondering, maybe some of the hardships of that, just making the transition properly and still being able to do your job.
Yeah, I think I had all the stuff down, right? Like that was the cool thing about being here and in my internships. I had the writing down, I had the editing down, but it was just doing it. My first story, literally my first story on air was the biggest comeback at the time in Marlins history. They were down 9 and 1 by 1, and we're doing the whole deal, live report the next day. And it's my first time doing a report. It was my first live report. I've watched hundreds of them. I produced a whole bunch and stood behind a camera as an intern, but it was the first time that I did it. And what is it called when you're, for those of you that are in television production, what is it called when you're in front presenting to a camera? You're doing a stand-up. Yeah. Yes, I couldn't stand. I was so nervous, my knees would not lock, like literally would not lock. So my first stand-up was a sit-down. I sat in the, but this is where creativity, right, and ingenuity and necessity all come crashing together. I sat in the stands and had my shooter shoot me in the stands, first close up and then, widen out to the space. The people who were sitting in these seats last night saw the greatest thing that's ever happened in Marlins history. And it happened all in the bottom of the 9th roll tape, right? So you got to figure it out because it had to happen. And it came to me rather quickly. But yeah, man, that the performance of it, the doing it of it in those first few months, I'm sure I would probably, if I went back and watched some of that stuff, here's several things I recognize. I wasn't drinking bourbon or smoking cigars, so my voice was considerably higher. And I think I had I don't know what it was I used to do. Maybe Sherelle could tell you best. But I used to just death stare, right into the middle of the camera. And I found it so off-putting, but nobody else did. And so nobody else did it. And then on prompter, so I'm a terrible glass reader. I'm not even good to this day. So my trick is, so you don't see my eyes moving, is I move. My whole body moves. I just move my head around and I move and I do hand gestures. And so you can't see that I'm reading, but obviously I am. And I've gotten better at reading conversationally, obviously, in 30 years, but I was not made to excel as a glass reader. So the fact that those 10 years of doing it used to create a bunch of anxiety, and now I never do it. And that part of it doesn't even exist. Every now and then I have to read prompter, and I just act like I'm okay with it, but I'm secretly not. Yeah. Other thoughts? Just a message to particularly the first year students. And those of you that started your first year and are moving through, you can take some of this too. You're killing it. The fact that you identified this now and you're here and you're participating, you may find out this is not what you want to do. And that's equally important. But the fact that you're here and you have so much road in front of you and so many different things that you can learn and succeed and fail, it's invaluable. And so I'm super proud of you guys, because I know in the first year you can just get kind of bombarded with everything, right? There's Greek letter organizations, there's residential life, there's your actual classwork that's not 13th grade. It is a whole nother level of academic ability that needs to be in place, and self-driven stuff now, because no one's screaming at you to do your homework. That part of the journey is such an important part. You got to keep doing it for it to really be in position to serve you. But I at least wanted to put that seed in your head, and I'm super proud of you guys. Isaac, you